It's time to catch up. Get your weekly wrap of TRT World's top stories with Debrief.
Before the Nakba, Palestine was home to a thriving society.
Landing.
Donald Trump has landed in the Middle East for his first official foreign trip. He's visiting Saudi Arabia, Qatar and the UAE.
It wasn't long before the numbers started racking up.
Donald Trump has welcomed $600 billion in Saudi Arabian investments.
As the two countries signed an arms deal worth more than $140 billion.
President Trump has come under fire for accepting a luxury jet from Qatar.
They're giving us a free jet.
Donald Trump's meeting with his Syrian counterpart Ahmed al-Shara on the sidelines of the summit in Riyadh on Tuesday.
Tough guy, strong pass, very strong pass fighter. After discussing the situation with Crown Prince Mohammed and President Erdogan of Turkey, I am also ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria to give them a fresh start.
It's a huge shift in the relations between the U.S. and Syria. I can't think of a move that would shift the relations more.
It's a sigh of relief for these Syrians.
U.S. President Donald Trump and the Emir of Qatar have signed a series of deals with the Gulf nation on the second leg of Trump's Middle East tour.
Including a $200 billion deal that will see Qatar Airways buying hundreds of jets from Boeing.
$1.2 trillion in economic exchange.
I think after signing these documents, we are going to another level of relationship between Qatar and the United States.
Well, the UAE says it's planning to invest almost $1.5 trillion into the US over the next 10 years. That announcement was made during the US president's visit.
In Abu Dhabi, the two countries announced a major partnership in the AI sector and defense and aviation deals, amounting to over $1.4 trillion.
The Russian President Vladimir Putin has proposed peace talks with Ukraine on the 15th of May and said those discussions could be held in the Turkish city of Istanbul.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he will be in Istanbul on Thursday, ready to talk with Vladimir Putin.
One very interesting thing about Thursday is that Vladimir Putin never said he would be coming to Istanbul.
In Moscow, there is appetite for diplomacy. However, the Russian position has not shifted when it comes to major demands.
European leaders from France, Germany, Poland and the UK met with Zelensky just a day earlier on Saturday. The group had agreed to push Moscow for a 30-day ceasefire starting from Monday. The Kremlin, however, rejected it.
In 2022, a critical agreement was signed, the Grain Corridor deal. This agreement, brokered by Türkiye and the UN, allowed for the safe export of Ukrainian grain through the Black Sea, helping to ease global food crisis triggered by the war.
Here in Istanbul at the Dolmabahce Palace, the building where the grain deal was brokered, becoming a symbol of the only successful mediation in this war.
Russia and Ukraine have agreed to exchange 1,000 prisoners of war. It's the biggest swap since the beginning of the conflict.
In general, we are satisfied with the results and we are ready to continue contacts.
The perspective here on what has unfolded over the last 2 days is vastly different. People here are under no illusions that what has happened over not only the last 24 hours, but the whole of this week represents further delaying tactics.
The fifth round of indirect nuclear talks between the US and Iranian officials is also in the making.
On Friday, diplomats from Iran, Germany, France and the United Kingdom are meeting in Istanbul.
Now, this renewed diplomatic activity marks what the Americans have recently described as positive progress. And after last week's talks, the US said that some progress had been made, but warned of serious gaps, especially over uranium enrichment levels. Iran says enrichment is non-negotiable.
One of the subjects undoubtedly under discussion was whether these three European countries would reimpose sanctions that existed between the 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA. That would be devastating to Iran and its economy, and it would certainly or could potentially interrupt efforts by the US to create some type of deal.
And now for even more top stories with News and Briefs. Thursday marked 76 years since the Nakba. when Zionist forces expelled over 700,000 Palestinians, committed massacres, and razed hundreds of towns. The displaced remember it as a catastrophe, and the killing hasn't stopped. On Wednesday alone, Israeli strikes killed at least 80 people across Gaza, including at 2 hospitals in Khan Yunis.
The staff who work here who tell us that they are terrified that if they continue to keep coming to work, they will be next.
On Monday, the WHO said 57 children have died of starvation as the Strip falls deeper into famine. The cause? Israel's nearly 3-month total blockade of all food aid to nearly 2 million Gazans. And it's still deadly to expose Israel's extermination campaign.
Media watchdogs are calling for independent investigations into attacks on journalists. And for those on the front lines, the risks remain. Their message is truth. Their only protection is a press vest.
And Israel is still displacing Palestinians in the occupied West Bank.
In recent months, Israeli forces have demolished more than 2,000 homes.
Rights groups took the UK to court Tuesday for supplying F-35 jet parts to Israel, accusing it of aiding war crimes in Gaza. Al-Haq and others say British-made components like ejector seats, laser-guided systems, fuselages, and more enable genocide. UK officials admit some legal breaches, but claim ending support would risk national security and NATO commitments.
UK government is also arguing on a technicality, which is it says we're not supplying it directly to Israel, we're supplying it to a global pool, and then the company takes it from that pool and then sells the fighter craft onto countries including Israel.
In the U.S., immigration policies remain in the White House crosshairs as Trump wields executive orders to weaken protections. The result? International students, Palestine supporters, visa holders, green card residents, protected groups, even tourists don't feel safe. Even citizens have been deported without due process. The courts are pushing back, but the courts are now the front line for civil liberties in America. In the last few weeks, judges have ordered the release of Columbia student Mohsen Madawi, Tufts scholar Rumeysa Öztürk, and on Wednesday, academic Badr Khan Suri. As the lawsuits mount, they can barely keep up, especially as Trump considers suspending habeas corpus, the last legal defense against unlawful detention. And on Thursday, an emergency appeal landed in the Supreme Court, Trump's attempt to end birthright citizenship. For many, also on the chopping block, universal injunctions, the legal tool judges have used to block his executive orders nationwide. Many now wonder, am I next? And in a stunning turn, the PKK terror group declared it's dissolving and dropping its terror tactics. The group is responsible for killing 40,000 people in 4 decades.
The decision by the PKK terrorist organization is important for lasting peace and stability. There are still steps to be taken, and we will follow the process closely.
And here's a taste of some of our programs.
The land reform question in Africa is not new or simply black and white. In South Africa, it's reigniting debate, raising questions about ownership, race, and even what constitutes a refugee in the United States.
These white South Africans are among the 49 Afrikaners granted refugee status by the Trump administration. The controversial move comes at a time when the U.S. is blocking mostly non-white refugees fleeing war and persecution.
Farmers are being killed. They happen to be white, but whether they're white or black makes no difference to me. But white farmers are being brutally killed, and their land is being confiscated in South Africa.
There's no data at all that backs that is persecution of white South Africans or white Afrikaners, to be more particular.
There are about 2.7 million Afrikaners in a population of 62 million, more than 80% of whom are black. But a 2017 government land audit revealed that white people own 72% of agricultural land, while black South Africans own just 4%.
This new law can take anything. You come and take your house, if you want your car, they can take it. But there's a lot of checks and balances in place and a process that must go through.
China is investing heavily in Latin American economies, and at this year's China CELAC Forum, it aims to further strengthen those ties.
China's President Xi Jinping is hosting leaders from the community of Latin American and Caribbean states. It's the world's third largest economic bloc, with a combined GDP of approximately $7 trillion. Beijing is working to deepen ties with the bloc. One key initiative is a credit line worth $9 billion for the region.
China and Latin American countries will strengthen their alignment of development strategies and deepen cooperation in infrastructure. China will import more high-quality products from Latin America.
China primarily exports high-value-added manufactured goods to the bloc, including electronics, telecommunications equipment, automotive parts, and machinery. Latin America's main exports to China are natural resources and agricultural commodities. Total trade between the partners has grown since 2010, reaching more than $515 billion in 2024. Although tariffs on Chinese goods have dropped from 145% to 30%, they remain in place. Many Latin American economies also face Donald Trump's baseline 10% tariff. This may be driving China and Latin America closer together.
Now, Real Madrid are gearing up to script a new chapter in their history. One of the team's most successful managers is making way for one of the best midfielders the club has ever produced.
Carlo Ancelotti has endeared himself to Real Madrid fans in his 2 spells in charge since 2013. In that time, he's clinched 15 titles. But now, after a trophyless season, he's decided to move on. Ancelotti will take over as head coach of Brazil's national team. The 65-year-old Italian's mission is to get their World Cup qualifying campaign back on track. Real Madrid, meanwhile, have moved quickly to get a deal done for Ancelotti's replacement. Xabi Alonso, a brilliant midfielder at Real back in the day, made 236 appearances in his 5 years at the club. As a manager, he led German side Bayer Leverkusen to a historic double last season. And the 43-year-old has received a ringing endorsement from the man he's replacing.
It was a basketball showcase in Athens over the weekend. FIBA's Champions League Final Four took place in Greece.
Basketball in Europe is a good mix of pure elements of the sport, things that make it watchable, and the continent's fierce love for anything with their team's name on it. Through May 9th and 11th, Ajax fans in Athens certainly yelled it true. And they made defending champs Unicaja work for their ticket into the final. On the flip side, Galatasaray became giant killers, coming back from 15 points down and ending Tenerife's 14-game winning streak.